Hello, welcome to Closing Day. Closing Day is a show all about real estate. We cover everything in real estate right from the moment you think about buying a piece of real estate all the way through to closing day. We cover all types of topics. My name is Jeff Delgrand. I'm your host tonight. And today we're going to be talking about real estate investing. Everybody wants to know about investing. When's the right time to buy? Should I buy a second property? How many properties should I buy? We're going to get into all that tonight. I personally believe real estate investing is it's like the saying that the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago. Second best time to plant that tree is now. And real estate investing, I feel, is the same way. With me tonight, I have Kerry Kaufman, who is a corrections officer full-time and a part-time real estate investor. Kerry, thank you very much for coming on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
So Kerry, I guess the first question is, what made you decide to get into investing in real estate?
Well, Jeff, I've always been interested in real estate. I would say probably 10 or 12 years ago when my oldest daughter went to university in Waterloo.
Yeah.
And after their first year, the second year, they get into the housing market over there. And I went into their house and I was moving her in on the first day over there.
Yeah.
And I start doing the math and I start counting up and I'm going, there's 6 kids in this house. This guy's making a lot of money. And
Yeah.
at that time, I thought, you know what, it's not so much about the money, but I've got 2 other kids following her over to Waterloo.
Oh, right.
So I figured, you know what, this might be something I should try, and see if it's something I like, and it could help them through school. So that is when I approached a couple friends that I work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like-minded to myself. They're energetic and they wanted to get out there and see what they could do in the world. So we got everything together and we found ourselves a real estate agent.
Yep.
And we went over and we looked around and lo and behold, we bought our first house. And it was really exciting. We closed our first place and we put the ad on Kijiji, and within 1 day we had it filled with 5 students.
Oh, really?
So within the next 3 months we bought 2 more. And that's how it went. We ended up with 4 of them over there. In a span of 3 years, and
Yeah.
we ended up selling them after about 4 years. The kids are leaving university or starting to leave university, and there was other issues over there with the city bylaws and stuff they were pushing the landlords and the students out of the subdivisions and trying to get them into those big buildings.
Right.
So
Yeah.
at that time we thought, you know what, let's take our real estate that we have here, let's just move it to Orangeville, which is closer to our houses. And everything we have pretty much is in the Orangeville area now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, something you said earlier on, you put an ad on Kijiji.
Yes.
Like, that's to find a tenant.
That's the only advertising I do is on Kijiji.
Really?
Yeah, I have townhouses. I have townhouses that the tenant would tell me they want to leave in 30 days or 60 days. I
Right.
would put them on Kijiji, and within 4 hours, I would have to take the ad down because I had too many people that want to show up to look at it. Orangeville
Really?
is a very hot area for rental.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there looking for a good quality home. They don't want the dumps and
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people that are happy with that, but there are a lot of people that want a good quality home to live in, and they're willing to rent, and that's how they want to live their life. They don't want to purchase.
Yeah.
And it's a service that
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
it
Yeah.
is.
Now, getting back to the student housing, I would imagine it's a little bit like babysitting, right? And not trying to put students down, but
Jeff,
you got
it
a
is
lot
a lot
of
like
kids.
babysitting.
Oh, yeah.
I would say right now, if I have a family in a home, I can
Yeah.
go 6 months without hearing from them. If you have students in a home, you're lucky if you go 6 days without hearing from them.
Oh, really?
I can't tell you the calls I got in the middle of the night. I've locked myself out. I'm drunk. I can't find my keys. And you know what? And they get the same answer that I always gave them: is I'll see you in the morning. So yeah, but it's student rental. You better be energetic, and definitely it really helps if you live close. I was an hour away from Waterloo, and that was a little too far because the
Yeah.
students do require a lot more attention. And
So would you get like one student some authority maybe to take care of things, or how would you handle that?
generally, one student is the one that approaches the ad, and
Yeah.
that's generally the person that I would be dealing with most of the time. And any issues, I would try to funnel through that one student.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I had phone calls about, you know, the hydro doesn't work, and I'd show up to the house the next day, and it's a light bulb that doesn't work, you know, and I had to actually show a high school student who was in engineering how to change a light bulb. So it's
How to change a light bulb.
Yes, students can
Righty
be
tighty, lefty loosey.
students can be very challenging, but you know what? As an investor, it's definitely a higher rental, because you're renting by the room.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
you're getting a lot more income in, but it's also a lot more attention, a lot more work involved with students.
All right. So how did you learn? I mean, there's a lot to learn about buying investment properties, how to handle tenants. I mean, how did you learn this stuff? Did you learn it before you got into the investment business? Did you?
A lot of it you learn as you go.
Yeah.
I will say that I was always kind of intrigued by people that had rental properties.
Right,
And
right.
thought, you know, that's kind of a neat thing, because when you get older in life and whatever, maybe you retire, it's nice to have that extra income, or sell it and have some money to be able to make sure you're debt free, at least when you go into retirement. So I basically learned as I went, but when people that had properties, I'd talk to them. I'd question them. You know,
Yeah,
I'd always asking questions. How's it going? What do you do? You know, what's the first step? But it is trial by error, and you do learn some valuable lessons. And I learned a lot of lessons when we purchased our first house.
I bet. So let's say I'm going to purchase my first investment property, and I come to you and say, Kerry, I want to get in the investment market. What do I do? Where should I get started? What would you suggest?
Well, if you're investing by yourself, it's a little differently. I started off with partners.
Right.
My first advice, now later on in my life, my brothers started to get into it, and I started investing with them. But the first lesson I learned the hard way was only put one name on a property, and only put one name on a mortgage.
And why is that?
Well, what happened was with us is there was three of us, and we planned on buying multiple properties. And when we bought our first property, we had a brand new mortgage broker who was just starting out. We might have even been one of his first customers.
Okay, it wasn't me.
No, it was not you.
Right.
No, it was not you. I wish you had been in the business at that time, but you weren't.
Yeah.
And he almost insisted that we all have our names on the deed of the house.
Right.
And what we found out later was, when we went to buy our second house, is because all our names were on that deed, all three of us were locked into that total value of the mortgage. So if the value of the mortgage was $300,000,
Yeah.
it wasn't as if I was responsible for $100,000, and my friends were responsible for $100,000. We were all responsible. So it was almost as if we had borrowed $900,000 between us,
Okay,
because
I
all
get
three
that.
of us were
Yeah.
responsible for that $300,000. And when we went to buy our second house, it was kind of like, that's when we kind of went, ooh, I think we made a mistake there. We should have put one name on that.
Yeah.
And then that would have freed up the other two, right? Because what happens is you can get a simple agreement signed between partners, is that the assets of this house and the liabilities of this house,
Like a partnership agreement.
A partnership agreement, exactly, are divided 3 ways or 4 ways or 2 ways, whatever your agreement is with how many people. But if you're going into by yourself, I've always believed that it's important to know what you're getting into,
Yeah.
but it's also important to have a good team around you. I have Chris Luxemburger, he's with iPro, and he's become a friend of mine. We've done a lot of deals together, and
Yeah.
Chris, he knows exactly what I'm looking for. He knows how I like, what kind of money I'm looking at,
Yeah.
in the sense of that when I rent a property, I don't want it to some of it to be coming in my pocket. I need a house to pretty much break even, or it's not something I even want to look at.
Right. Right.
You have been my mortgage broker for a couple of years. You're
Yeah.
part of my team, and Gina Cecchi is she's my lawyer. She's part of my team.
So you
I
wanna have-
consider this a team, and
Yeah.
it's
So you want a good team around
a
you.
very good team. Yeah.
That would make sense. Now
Yeah.
you mentioned something about cash flow. Now, how important is that?
I guess it depends how much you earn in your own life, your own job.
Yeah.
I had 3 children and my wife and I, and so we didn't have a ton of excess money that I wanted to be dumping into properties every month.
Right.
You know,
right.
I didn't mind making the initial payment and getting the property, but after that, I pretty much wanted to cover itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something I want to every month have to put $300 or $400 in just to keep it running.
I could see that being important.
Well, especially when you get into numerous properties.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are hoping the market will continue to rise, so they'll buy a property that has a negative cash flow, thinking that down the road they'll sell the property for more money and that'll compensate them for their negative cash flow.
But that's more of a speculator than an investor.
Yeah, that's a game I don't know if I want to get into.
Like I can remember back, when we used to do day trading. You know, you'd buy a stock and sell it an hour later.
Yeah.
That's all speculating. Yeah, it's I think you should be prepared that if you buy a property and if it was to drop 25% in the next couple of years, is it still valuable? Is it still valuable to you? Can you still make it work? And that's the important thing, because real estate will come back. As we found out, it's not a straight line straight up. It's obviously it has its dips and.
I do tell people that want to get into investing that even if the market goes up and down, which it does, it's going to happen inevitably. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Rents tend to be somewhat stable.
Very stable.
Yeah. So if the market goes down, rents don't go down.
No.
So if you can make sure your cash flow is in a good position where you're not losing money, chances are pretty good you'll always be in a position where you're not going to lose money on that investment.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah, so that's,
and if you're locked into a 5-year mortgage, other than your taxes maybe going up very slightly, your expenses don't change for 5 years.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And that's what I tended to do. If I could afford it now, and I can afford it in 5 years from now.
So if somebody gets into real estate investing, what's your thoughts on whether they should be incorporated or not?
I'm obviously not an expert in that.
Yeah, just as your opinion.
Though I tell my wife I'm an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in that, but when I did look into it at one time, the only thing that I found intriguing about becoming incorporated was the liability part of it, because once you become that incorporation, the personal liability of anything that might happen on your properties is now a corporate liability.
Right.
So anything that you have in your life is basically guarded, it's protected. That was the only benefit I really found from incorporating.
Okay.
For me personally, the other drawback for that is once you become a business, when you want to purchase another house or another property, you're now getting a business loan. You're not getting a mortgage that 2.19% or whatever the going rate is now. Yeah, you're getting a business loan, and as you would know better than me, they're probably up around 4 or 5%. So does that make the property even profitable now?
Right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to ask you about scary stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Welcome back to Closing Day. I'm your host, Jeff Delgrand, and today I have with me Kerry Kaufman, a real estate investor who has been giving some advice on how to invest in real estate. Now, Kerry, we got into some stuff that was kind of interesting with legalities. What about, shouldn't a property investor have an accountant?
I would say most definitely, yeah.
Yeah?
I find that for tax time at the end of the year, to keep my costs down, my accounting costs down, I keep everything very organized.
Right.
but I don't do my own income tax at the end of the year. I pass that off to a professional. I just want to make sure that it's done properly, because I don't want that, that phone call.
So yeah, because we talked earlier on about capital expenses and maintenance.
Yes.
What's the difference between those two things? We'll just go that far into accounting, and then we won't go too far into that topic.
It's quite simple, actually. Maintenance is basically what you need to do on a daily basis to keep the place livable and functioning.
Right.
If you have a leaky tap and a dripping toilet, and just stuff that the day-to-day things that can happen in a house, that's all considered maintenance. So it's a write-off at the time. Okay. A capital expense, if you were to take up your carpets and put down hardwood floors, for example. Right. That cost would be basically you would claim that on your house when you sell it. Okay. So when you pay your capital gains, yes, because it goes against your capital gains, right? So you would take all those capital costs off the top of the price of the house when you sell it. Right. So that's when you write it off. It is at the end. Okay. Now, what about buying a house as opposed to buying a condo? What are the pros and cons with that? We have a few houses, but most of the properties that we have are condominiums. Mm-hmm. They're condominium townhouses. They're much easier for us for maintenance. Okay. Because though you pay a condo fee, it's a write-off, because it's a cost that's incurred. You pay a condo fee, but you don't worry about grass, and you don't have to worry about snow removal. Okay. And like some of our tenants, I have a tenant she's well into her 60s. I don't think she wants to cut her grass and shovel her snow. So it's nice that they come and do that for her, and you don't worry about your shingles on a roof, or all that stuff is part of the condo corporation, and that's what you pay your fee for. Okay, all right, so that makes sense. Now, what about collecting rent? It's important. You've got to get that income so you can carry the property expenses. Have you ever had issues with collecting rent, or how will you handle that? Touch wood. I think this is wood. It's wood. Yes, wood. Yeah, we're good. Touch wood. I've never really been on a month's rent, and I've been doing this for probably 10 or 12 years now, and I've never been on a month's rent, including the students, which is unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Wow. And I didn't threaten them. I didn't have to threaten them. As I said earlier, I advertised on Kijiji. Yeah. I set it up an open house, something similar to if you're selling your property. I set up an open house, and generally between 4 and 8 people would come through. Okay. And I just talk to them. I find out where they work. I find out who's in their family, who they live with, and what their hobbies are. Just I don't want some guy. I don't want to find out some guy's a rock musician and he's living in a semi or a townhouse, because then I have to deal with the fallout from that. Right. So right. I just try to get to know them a little bit, and I get a feel for them, and touch wood, I've been pretty fortunate. Yeah. Yeah, you can't go too wrong with that then. Yeah, and just on that note, I had a tenant that when she first moved in, her first couple months payments were right on time, and then she started to slide a bit off, and it became later in the month when I got my rent. And she's an older lady, and she's very sweet. So I worked with her, and every month I'd have to work with her and say, okay, no problem, give me half of it on this date. Yeah. And then her pension kicked in overseas after about a year of this, and she's my best tenant. She's fantastic, and she's been with me now for like 6 years. So it was worthwhile working with her. It was in a case like that. Yes, it was worth working with her. Oh, that's a good story. Yeah, it's nice. It's it's a rental business. It's a real estate business, but it's also a people business, and that's important. That's part of it. Yes. Yeah. It's a people business. That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah. Now, talking about stories, I got to ask this. What is the scariest or the funniest story that you can sort of conjure up? Well, probably the worst that's happened to us. Yeah. We had a century-old home when we were in Waterloo, renting to students in Waterloo. And one day it was in the middle of the summer, but there was a hailstorm and then torrential downpour. And the water rose up from the grates had all been covered with the ice. And so as the water rose, it came across our lawn, filled all the window wells, and pushed the windows in. Oh. So eventually what happened was we ended up with about 3 feet of water in the basement of a 100-and-something-year-old home. Ooh, that can't be good. It wasn't good, and it was quite expensive to have it removed. But it was a slightly finished basement. It wasn't beautifully done. And so we had to have the mold remediation come in. It was quite expensive at the end, but hey, those you know, that's
Part of doing business.
that's part
I
of
guess,
doing
right?
business. That is, it's part of doing business. And
Yeah.
one of the funniest situations, though I would say maybe one of the scariest situations, as you know, your son and my son lived together at one of our rental houses.
One of the students, yes, they
Yes.
called you.
Yes.
Lost my keys.
Yeah, I went over to the house, and as soon as I opened the front door, there was a smell like, if you had to guess, you would think it was a dead animal, but you weren't sure.
Oh.
So I went into the house, and the four of them were sitting at the table drinking a beer, like there was nothing going on, and I was gagging. Guys, what is this smell? And they're like, what smell? Well, we don't smell anything. I think they got used to it. So I did a little checking around, and they had another roommate who went to Vancouver for 3 weeks. He was due back in a couple of days, so he'd been gone for a while.
Yeah.
He made a chicken casserole on the stove, ate part of it, and said, guys, I'll clean this up when I get back. And he left.
Really?
So
3 weeks.
It would have been 2.5 weeks. So the chicken it wasn't quite moving yet.
Yeah.
I threw it in the garbage. I took it out. I threw it in the bin. So I come back to the house because I wanted to vent some steam on these four young fellows. And when I get back to the house, there's another smell. Well, I'd realized that at the back of the kitchen, they decided that they could cover the end wall with empty beer cases. And
Students, guys, right?
Guys. And the challenge is that they couldn't buy the same brand twice. So as it got near the top, of course, it became more challenging because there was a lot less choice out there for them to buy.
Right.
And yeah, I could smell that. It was quite ripe as well. But, you know, there is some funny stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
You know, like I've gone over, like I mentioned earlier, because all the hydro was gone in the house, and it turns out it's a light bulb. But it's just, you know, some things are frustrating, and some things you just have to laugh at because,
Yeah.
you know,
You just got to roll with it, I guess.
you got to
in that
go
case.
with it.
That's something. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine how many stories you have about student rentals, but
You know what? It's funny because some of the horror stories
yeah.
I would have is when I was actually looking to purchase houses.
Oh.
Because when you go to Waterloo and you're around the two universities there, Wilfrid Laurier and Waterloo, most of the houses in between are rental houses. So when you go through these houses to look to purchase, you just can't imagine how some of these kids live. You know, it's unbelievable the mess that some of these. You know, you go in a house with 5 girls and you think, oh, this would be nice. Oh my God, it was worse. It was worse than the cases of beer in the kitchen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know.
Because once kids get out away from their parents and get some freedom and get to let their hair down a bit, then
yeah. So student rental is challenging, but it's more financially beneficial.
right.
But it is challenging, very challenging.
Yeah, I guess if you can rent, you know, per room, you're getting $300 to $500 or whatever it is per room.
Yeah.
That adds up pretty quickly.
Yeah, very
But,
much.
Then you're dealing with a person has a different mentality about the place they're living in.
Yes.
It's not like it's their home and then they're going to feather their nest and keep it a certain way because it's just a temporary accommodation to them, right?
Yeah, and vice versa. When you rent to a family, one thing I tell them is when they move in, I'll just say basically, guys, even though I own this property, this is your home, right? So if you want to paint a room, send me the bill. I'll pay for the paint. If there's something you want to do to improve the house, as long as it's not something silly and really expensive, you know what? I'm more than willing to go with it because this is where you live. This is your home. So I'm quite flexible that way. I don't insist on certain paint colors. If you have a baby, paint it yellow, paint it pink, whatever. It's a coat of paint. You know, it can always be changed. You know.
Yeah, but that's nice. So they can customize it to themselves, make it feel more like home.
Absolutely.
They're still maintaining a property for you.
They're maintaining
So
the
everybody
property,
wins.
and who knows? They may stay longer. Less work for me in the long run. You know.
Yeah.
And if they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, and I've heard that in this market, rentals are really tight.
Very, very difficult.
So when you run an ad, you're getting probably even more response nowadays than.
I haven't had to rent one in a while because I don't think there's anywhere for people to go, quite frankly.
Right.
And I've had a couple tenants now who used to rent from me that have moved out of Orangeville that are coming back that have sent me texts asking, "Do you have anything? We're coming back to Orangeville, and I really need to. I can't find anything to rent."
Wow.
So I think Orangeville is a very, very underserviced for rent right now. For rent.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's just Orangeville or if that's sort of the GTA. It seems to be a story I hear quite often.
I guess when you look at the price of housing, you know, it's very difficult for if you're in Toronto and you have to pay $1 million for a house.
Yeah.
How much do you have to rent it for to cover your costs? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you want to be cash flow negative, how much do you have to rent that house for?
Oh, you could.
You can't.
Yeah, not unless
you can't.
Donald Trump has some relatives up here who want to rent or something. Yeah, I couldn't imagine that. So really, things we've covered, when some people buy property or buy investment property, cash flow is important.
Yes.
Have a good team around you.
Very good team. Yeah.
Right. So I once heard this philosophy that if you take people that are better than you and surround yourself with them, they will pull you up. So that's sort of your
Donald Trump theory again.
Is that Donald Trump?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I don't want to be quoting him, that's for sure. So and then
definitely, some of those jobs are done by professionals.
Yeah.
I have no idea. You know what I mean?
Right.
So obviously, I think like I mentioned before, we had a mortgage broker that really cost us a lot because he didn't know the rules around the fact that we'd all be tied to the $300,000 mortgage.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rules
and that
there,
cost
yeah.
us a lot, in the sense of being able to expand. What we eventually did on that property was we got a lawyer and we paid I think at least $1,000 to have our names taken off the deed, and we had to go back to the lender
and get
reapproved and get them. Yeah,
that would be a pain.
Yeah, it was very much.
All right, well, we've definitely picked up quite a few tips on this, and I appreciate that you spending the time with us and sharing with us all this valuable information, because you can't learn this in school. We have to ask someone like yourself
and learn as you go.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So I want to thank you very much, for being on the show with us today. Kerry, it's been a pleasure, chatting with you about investing in real estate.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, and I hope you got some good value out of this show, and we'll be seeing you next time on Closing Day.